We're more than halfway through this crazy college football season, and it has definitely been one for the ages. As of right now, I have no clue who the 4 teams will be that'll be making the college football playoff. Usually most years, there are about 5 or 6 teams who can realistically make it, but this year, there are more than 10 who I think have a solid chance of reaching the college football playoff. With only 4 spots, what in the hell will happen? I have no clue. What needs to happen for certain teams to make it? Your guess is as good as mine. But I thought it'd be kind of fun to dive deep and look at the teams who I think have a realistic chance of making the playoff and what essentially needs to happen for them to reach it. Before we get to today's video, make sure you smash that subscribe button if you love college football and turn on those notifications so you never miss a video in the future. Okay, so heading into this weekend of college football, I currently have 13 teams who I think still have a legitimate chance at reaching the college football playoff. Here are the teams I currently have: Alabama, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Clemson, Texas A&M, Florida, Cincinnati, BYU, Wisconsin, Miami, Indiana, Oregon, and Oklahoma State. Again, so those are 13 teams who I think have a realistic chance to reach the college football playoff, but in all seriousness, it's unrealistic for a lot of these teams. But as we've seen in 2020, anything can happen. So with that being said, let's take a look at the pathways for these 13 teams and how one of these guys can be a Cinderella story and reach the college football playoff. As things stand right now, Oklahoma State is number 14 in the AP polls, so they have a ways to climb. However, they're currently the highest ranked Big 12 team and have the best chance of winning out and winning the Big 12 championship. Now, I know, as I've mentioned, anything can happen, but I think the only chance the Big 12 has of having a team in the college football playoff this year is with Oklahoma State. And even then, I think it's extremely unlikely. If the Cowboys were to win out, they'd finish 10-1 and they'd be Big 12 champions, which is definitely an impressive resume to have. Looking at their upcoming schedule, they have a prime opportunity to solidify themselves as a top 10 team as they'll travel to Oklahoma to play the Sooners this weekend. Now, I know Oklahoma isn't living up to expectations this season, but that would still be a huge win for the Cowboys. They finished with Texas Tech, TCU, and Baylor, who aren't likely going to be favorites to win, but anything can happen in the Big 12 on any given week. A loss the rest of the way would end their playoff hopes, so it's imperative that they win out. Even if Oklahoma State finishes 10-1 and they are the Big 12 champions, it's still really tough to see them getting in. Either the SEC or the ACC will likely get 2 teams in, and then you have to worry about Ohio State and potentially a few other teams. Now, chaos can definitely happen in Oklahoma State's favor, but they're going to need a lot of things to go their way. So with that being said, I'll give them a 10% chance of reaching the playoff. With only one team likely having any chance to reach the playoff in the Big 12, only one team has a realistic chance in the Pac-12. Sorry, USC, but you guys have to be the worst 2-0 team I've seen this season. The Oregon Ducks are the Pac-12's only hope of getting a team into the college football playoff. They're currently ranked number 11, so their path to climb 7 spots could be potentially difficult. Their remaining schedule is fairly easy, so we probably won't see Oregon play a decent team until the Pac-12 title game. At this point, it looks like they'll face USC, and who knows how impressive of a win that potentially can be. They'll have to win in convincing fashion the rest of the way, as that'll likely be their only ranked win of the entire season, assuming USC can win out too. They have no room for error. If they lose, their chances are shot. Again, they'll need a lot to happen. They'll need some SEC teams to lose, they'll need some ACC teams to lose, but who knows, again, 2020, anything can go down. But I'll give Oregon still a 15% chance of reaching the playoff. Up next, we have good old Indiana, the surprise story so far of the college football season. For them, I think there's only one path to reach the college football playoff, and it's simple: win out. I know that Indiana has looked really good this season and they've shocked a lot of people, but are they seriously one of the 10 best teams in the country? I don't want to knock Indiana or anything they've accomplished, but I don't think they are truly one of the 10 best teams in the country. Again, maybe they are, but for me personally, I don't buy the hype. So, Indiana, with that being said, here's your chance to prove me and everyone in the country wrong. They play Ohio State this weekend, which will be a very telling game for both teams. The Hoosiers are currently ranked 9th in the country, but they are 21-point underdogs this weekend, so I think that's pretty telling of what people think of Indiana. If they lose, they're done. No way around it. I think Ohio State is a near lock to reach the playoff, even if they lose one game this season. The only way Indiana can steal Ohio State's spot is if they beat them this week and finish the season undefeated and win the Big Ten title. Again, anything is possible possible, but I really doubt that happens. But I'll be an optimist, and I'll still give the Indiana Hoosiers a 1% chance of reaching the playoffs. Is the U back? The record is nice, and they're ranked 12, but they've had a lot of close wins this season. Their playoff hopes are somehow still alive. If they win out, they'll have a chance. But however, it'll be pretty tough as they currently sit behind Clemson and Notre Dame in the ACC standings. They would need Clemson to lose another game to overtake them, and I just don't see that happening. Notre Dame would likely have to lose 2 games the rest of the season as well, and I don't see that happening either. There's a good chance the ACC sends 2 teams with Clemson and Notre Dame, so sorry Miami, maybe next year will be your year. Can Notre Dame and Clemson both lose games this season? Sure, absolutely. Will it happen? Probably not. I'll give Miami a 0.5% chance of reaching the college football playoff. It's tough to really buy into the Wisconsin hype because we've only seen 2 games from them this season, but they're a legitimate team in the Big Ten and a legitimate team at potentially reaching the college football playoff. It'll be tough for the Badgers to make up ground, especially considering 2 of their games have already been canceled this year, but the opportunity is still there for them. They have a pretty competitive schedule to close out the regular season, including some top 25 matchups. Their remaining schedule is one of the toughest in the country, so they can convince some people that they're legit. Plus, if they're able to knock off Ohio State in the Big Ten title game to win the conference championship, it'll be fairly easy to give the Badgers one of those 4 playoff spots. So it's pretty simple for them. Win out, beat Ohio State in the Big Ten title game, and you're in. I'll give Wisconsin a 10% chance of making it. If you saw my BYU video from a few weeks ago, or have listened to my podcast over the last month, you know I'm a huge fan of this BYU team. I know a lot of people don't buy the hype, but I think they're a really good team. Good enough to be in the top 10? Probably not, but I do think they're at least deserving of being in the top 15 or so. Now I get it, they have played absolutely nobody, which will definitely hurt them. Their best matchup came against Boise State, and they absolutely manhandled them. But I sadly don't think that win will be enough to convince the playoff committee. But again, this BYU team definitely deserves respect. They have 2 very winnable games to close out the season, and they're likely going to finish 10-0. Unfortunately, I just don't see any way the Cougars can make their way in. They will need absolute chaos in front of them, and even if that were to happen, I just think there are some other teams that are around their range that will have the advantage over BYU. The Cougars have been a great story this year, and they'll likely play in a New Year's 6 game, but I don't think they can reach the playoff. However, I'll still be an optimist and give them a 2% chance of making it. Before we get to the second half of this video, if you could please take a second to give this video a thumbs up, I would greatly appreciate it. It helps the video reach other college football fans, and I'm trying to grow the best college football community here on YouTube. Again, it only takes a second and helps me deliver you more college football content. I am fully sold on this Cincinnati team. I think they're legit. If you haven't watched a Bearcats game yet, please do so this weekend. Currently sitting at number 7 in the nation, this team has the best chance to be the first group of 5 teams to reach the college football playoff. Not only do they have an incredible offense, but their defense is arguably one of the 5 best in the entire country. I don't care that they play in the American Conference, they're legit. They've absolutely dominated everyone they've played, with their closest win being 14 points. Their next 3 games are UCF, Temple, and Tulsa, 3 above average and respectable teams. If Cincinnati can win out and win the American title game and finish the season 11-0 in dominating fashion, they'll have one of the best cases out there for that 4th and final playoff spot. Now, how can they leapfrog some of these teams in front of them? Well, for starters, they're going to need Florida and Texas A&M to lose a game at some point the rest of the way. Their best bet with Florida is hopefully having them lose to Alabama in the SEC title game. Texas A&M plays against Auburn later in the year, and I think that's their best chance of losing. However, with them likely not playing in the SEC title game, that gives the Bearcats a very solid chance to jump them. Another chance, though very unlikely, would be if Notre Dame were to beat Clemson in the ACC title game, knocking Clemson out and opening up another spot. Or if Notre Dame were to have a slip up before the season ends and they lose to Clemson, that'll open up another spot as well. Now, I know these are a bunch of different scenarios and they're probably unlikely, but I think Cincinnati could be on the brink of making history. I'm going to give them a 25% chance of reaching the college football playoff. Moving on to the Florida Gators, they have a very, very easy path, and it's simple. Just win out. The rest of Florida's schedule is pretty laughable. Like, there's no chance they don't win these next 4 games by at least 3 touchdowns each. It's looking like we're going to be set up for an Alabama-Florida SEC title game, which will be quite the battle. And again, as I mentioned, it's simple. If Florida beats Alabama to win the SEC, they're in. No questions asked. If they lose, they're likely done. It doesn't matter what happens to the teams in front of them or behind them. Win out, and you're in. I give Florida a 40% chance, as I think Alabama is the better team and will be favored in that game, but I think Florida is more than capable capable of winning. Texas A&M is so damn weird. I feel like we haven't heard anything about them at all this season, but yet they're somehow ranked number 5 in the country. They got blown out by Alabama, but they were somehow able to pull off the victory against Florida. They've had close games against Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, and Arkansas, so I really don't think Texas A&M is all that good. Definitely not good enough to be the 5th ranked team in the country, but yet they somehow still have a shot at reaching the college football playoff. Unless Alabama just completely falls off, A&M can't play in the SEC title game, which will definitely hurt them. As I mentioned earlier, if Florida beats Alabama, they're in, but I think the Crimson Tide would have a better chance of making it than A&M would. So for the Aggies, they'll need Alabama to beat Florida, hopefully have Notre Dame beat Clemson, and then maybe have some chaos in the Big Ten with Ohio State somehow losing. There are still ways that A&M can reach the playoff, even with one loss and no appearance in the SEC title game. However, I just don't think they're all that good, and I think the committee knows that too. I'll give the Aggies a 5% chance of reaching the playoff. Now, these final 4 spots are fairly easy, as you just win out and you're in. Since they're sitting at the number 4 spot, I'm going to start with Clemson. I think they're one of the 2 best teams in the country, but they didn't bring their A game against Notre Dame, and it hurt them. The Tigers are still in the driver's seat the rest of the season, and will most likely be playing in the ACC title game with the rematch against Notre Dame. For Clemson, beat Notre Dame, and you're in. Lose to the Fighting Irish for a second time, and you're out. I'm fairly confident Clemson will find themselves in the playoffs yet again, but stranger things have happened in 2020. However, I'm still going to give Clemson an 80% chance of making the playoff, as I think they're going to beat Notre Dame the second time around. Up next, we have the 3rd ranked Ohio State Buckeyes. For them, again, it's simple. Win out, and you're in. They have a great matchup this week against the 9th ranked Indiana Hoosiers, but that's looking like it could be their only great win all season. I don't expect the Buckeyes to lose during the regular season, so it'll all come down to that Big Ten title game. At this point, I really don't have any clue who they're going to be playing in the Big Ten title game, but it's imperative they win. Now, if Ohio State were to lose in the Big Ten title game, things could get interesting. Let's say Florida loses to Alabama and Clemson loses to Notre Dame, leaving a potential open spot for maybe a team like Wisconsin to sneak into the top 4. There's going to be a conference with 2 teams that reach the playoff, whether it's the ACC, the SEC, or the Big Ten. It very well could be both Wisconsin and Ohio State who make it, especially if Ohio State loses a close one. The easiest option is for Ohio State to go undefeated, which I ultimately think they do, but there is a possibility that they could get in even losing in the Big Ten title game. For that reason, I'm going to give the Buckeyes an 85% chance of reaching the college football playoff. Notre Dame is currently ranked 2, and I'm fairly certain Notre Dame fans are even shocked by how well this Irish team has performed in 2020. They're 8-0 on the season and have really hit their stride over the last few weeks. After close games against Louisville and Florida State, Notre Dame has really dominated over the last month, including that thrilling overtime victory against Clemson. For the Irish, if they win out and they can somehow beat Clemson in the ACC title game, they'll be in. Now, things could become really tricky if they were to lose to Clemson. Let's say they lose to the Tigers and assume Alabama and Ohio State run the table. That leaves one open spot, which could still easily go to Notre Dame. If that situation were to play out, it looks like the teams that'll be up for grabs for that final playoff spot will be between Notre Dame, Texas A&M, and Cincinnati. At least that's my best guess. I think that this will all come down to how Notre Dame looks in that ACC title matchup. If it's a close game and they nearly beat Clemson again, I think Notre Dame will be more than deserving of that 4th spot. But if they were to get blown out and lose by a few touchdowns, I could see the committee possibly going in the direction with Cincinnati, depending on how they finish the season. Sure, there could be teams like Oregon, BYU, Oklahoma State still alive in the mix, but ultimately I think it comes down to those first few teams I mentioned. I'm not confident that Notre Dame can beat Clemson again, but I think they have the best chance of making it amongst teams who can lose in their title game. I'll give Notre Dame a 70% chance of making the playoffs. Finally, we have the number 1 ranked Alabama Crimson Tide. I fully expect them to win out and be in the SEC title game. Again, if they win out, they're in, no questions asked. Now, just like with Notre Dame, things could get tricky should Alabama lose to Florida in that title game. Let's say that happens and Clemson beats Notre Dame. Good luck trying to figure out those 4 teams, especially if both those losses are fairly close. Personally, I think Alabama would get the benefit of making the playoffs still, as I think they're the better team than Notre Dame. What if Alabama loses by 14 and Notre Dame loses by 3? Things could get absolutely bonkers if that were to happen. Of course, this is assuming Alabama loses and assuming Notre Dame loses as well, which I think is really unlikely. However, it could make things very interesting to say the least, but I'm still going to give Alabama a 90% chance of reaching the college football playoff. Well, there you guys have it. There are the scenarios for the 13 teams who I believe still have a legitimate chance of reaching the college football playoff. Which 4 teams do you ultimately think will make it? Drop a comment down below and let me know. If you made it to this part of the video, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you guys sticking this one out with me. If you haven't done so yet, please give this video a thumbs up, as it helps the video grow and it helps the channel grow as well and allows me to make more videos just like this. If you love college football, make sure to click that subscribe button so you never miss another video. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all right here in my next video.